Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the rental series offered by and hosted by Archway Partners, Inc. My name is Eric Davey Gislason. I am the founder and a coach for Archway Partners, Inc. We are a real estate coaching company, and we offer not only courses, training, but we offer one-on-one coaching and group coaching around everything from value proposition to the decision makers to just the everyday process of both rentals and sales. A little bit of background about me. I've been in the business, in the real estate industry in New York City for over almost 20 years. I've had roles as manager, director of sales and development. I've trained agents. I'm a master certified negotiation expert and train agents in collaborative negotiation tactics and techniques. And I am the founder of Archway Partners. So I come to this with a lot of experience. And this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart for a couple of reasons. First is that as I mentioned, I come from a background as a director of sales and development, and when I started my role as a manager, primarily my role was to manage rentals, to train in rentals, to train agents in the process of executing on rentals, building that trust rapport with the clients, so that we had a much higher than average deal ratio with our clients, and then a huge and robust repeat and referral business at the firm that I worked for. And so this is something that we did extremely well. And we were able to essentially crack the code on how to gain trust and rapport with renters and get the sticky kind of clients that we all want. So today, what I'm going to focus on is one particular objection that is raised in the rental market. You know, we're in the rental season now, and many of you maybe are dusting off that rental business that you had or that you did several years ago. You went into sales, and you've been doing sales and on both the buy and sell side for several years, and now, because business requires it and because your income requires it, you're back looking at rentals as a source of income for your business. Look, I think it's an amazing way to hedge against any market. And I'll tell you a little bit more about my the portfolio of rentals that I have that really helps me continue to push forward, to continue to motivate and drive forward, even in a market that is a little bit challenging, like the one that we're in right now. So today we're going to just focus on the paperwork objection that arises when we have those intro rental conversations or those consultations with first-time renters or with renters when we first meet them. All right. And if you were with me last week in this series, this rental series, I talked about the four parts of the sale. The four really key steps that you need in order to win with every rental client, or with as many rentals clients as you can. And if you're not going to win with the rental client, at least those four steps help you determine whether that client is right for you and whether you're right for that client. And that's ultimately what we want to do, right? We're not going to have a 100% hit rate. Better to know whether the client is going to be there with you, is going to stick with you, is going to trust you to do your job, rather than compete against you to get the job done, right? We want to know all about that, and we want to have our opportunity to deliver a value proposition and explain to that client why they would be better off working with us, even if they end up having to come out of pocket. And as I said yesterday, for those of you who are doing sales, this is as we enter into what is inevitably going to be a conversation that many rental agents have been having with renters for years and years and years. We are about to enter into a time in our industry where it is going to be essential that you have that same conversation with any buyer, right? About what does your service cost, and how do you get paid, right? The confident agent can ask, do you know how I get paid? Right? And this is true in rentals and in sales. Are you aware of how I get paid? Let me demystify that for you so that you understand how this is going to work. because ultimately that's the kind of thing that builds trust and rapport with clients. They want to know that if they put their faith and trust in you, that they can trust you and that you're going to be above board and that you're not going to cheat them. That's what clients worry about, whether you're going to cheat them and make them feel right brain taken advantage of, or left brain that you're going to take their money, that you are going to not offer a service that's commensurate with the price that you charge, and that you are going to end up essentially in their minds taking more than you deserve or taking their money. Those are the things that they're concerned about, and those are legitimate concerns, as we talked about last week. So if you remember those 4 steps that we talked about last week, and these are the 4 steps for any successful sale. As I mentioned, I don't care if you're selling cars or toasters or encyclopedias door to door or real estate. The 4 steps are qualify, educate, build rapport, and close. Qualify, educate, build rapport, trust, and close. Not in that order. Closing is going to happen at the end, but all the 3 others, to qualify, build trust, and educate, or build rapport and educate, those are happening, in and amongst that intra-rental conversation. Those are happening all while you're having that conversation. They don't have to be linear. Although obviously building rapport and trust is going to open the door to having a conversation about qualifications, about qualifying that client. Building trust and rapport is going to open the door to them being open to the education that you can provide them and that you can serve them with. So, as I said, it's not linear, but trust and rapport should be something that you're trying to build as quickly as possible. So let's get into this. So when we talk about the paperwork process, let me get my slides over here. When we talk about the paperwork process, really what I'm talking about here is when you get to that point, and you should get to that point when you're qualifying the client, that you're encouraging them to share with you the paperwork that is going to be necessary for them to rent an apartment. All right. As we all know, there are a few different facets to this. You have not only the client, their paperwork, but then likely there may be a roommate or a partner, and then there may also be a guarantor, right? So you're talking about several layers of paperwork, and you may be only on the phone with one of the clients, right? In an ideal world, you have everybody who's a stakeholder in that process on the phone. Maybe not the guarantor on your first conversation, but if you can get the roommates, all 3 roommates, or the boyfriend, girlfriend, partners, boyfriend, girlfriend, if you can get them all on the call at the same time, that is going to help you, because now you're eliminating that game of telephone that we talk about, right? Where you tell the client one thing, and then they tell their roommate another thing, and then they tell their guarantor a third thing. And by the time it gets to the guarantor, it either doesn't sound like it's necessary, or it sounds completely out of whack, and the guarantor's like, I can't believe you're asking me to do this. There's just so much confusion that can happen, right? So let's just talk about the tenants themselves. Who are the stakeholders, and what paperwork we're going to ask from them, right? We are going to want a basic set of paperwork. I err on the side of saying to the client, this is the most conservative landlord approach, right? If we're going to be looking at rentals, I will talk to them about co-ops and condos, and maybe I won't go as far as to get all of what we would need in a board package, but I might mention that to them to kind of anchor or give context to what I'm actually going to ask of them. If you understand, if anchoring is a technique that we use to justify the highest possible or lowest possible amount of something, and we put that on as a marker, and then we negotiate from that point, right? So if I introduce the idea of a co-op or a condo to a rental client, I may say to them, look, in an extreme case, if we're looking at a co-op or a condo, they may be looking at a really, really heavily scrutinized process. They may ask for a significant amount of paperwork. And what do I mean by that? I mean, they may ask for multiple years of full tax returns, including state and federal returns. They may ask for 2 or 3 full bank statements, and they'll want to see every account that you have so they can determine what kind of post-closing reserves you have. There may be reference letters involved, several pay stubs. I'm going to go through all of that, just a quick mention of it, so that when I get to what a typical landlord in a rental scenario might ask for, it's going to seem, in contrast, a lot more tame, right? And I can then, when I ask them to send me paperwork, I could say, let's start with this paperwork. And then if we have to go to the extreme, we will, as opposed to making the extreme seem like what a basic landlord will ask for. And a lot of agents make this mistake. They'll apologize for what a landlord is asking for as though it's too much, and they'll put themselves in a position where their client feels justified in negotiating the paperwork that they're going to provide them. And that's something we don't want to get into. We want them to understand, and this is going to be the next slide, why it's in their interest to do this, right? So while I'm building that trust and rapport, while I'm talking to them about who they are, what they want, what they need, gathering information, starting with them, and highlighting the fact that I understand what they're going through, I understand the process, plucking benefits from my menu of benefits. For those of you who have taken my value proposition course, I'm tailoring those benefits to meet the pain points or the needs of that client. And as I'm doing that and building that trust and rapport, then I'm going to deal with if the objection paperwork comes up, and it usually will, or if it's not an objection, it's just a question. And remember, an objection just is a way to keep the conversation going. An objection is an unmet need, an unanswered question. That's all it is. So if they bring up paperwork or they object to paperwork, they say, I'm not doing X. That's just their way of leaving a door open or uncovering or describing to you an unanswered question. And this is your ability to answer that objection and to answer that question is crucial. And how you do it is crucial. I have heard agents for years answer the objection to paperwork by saying, well, that's just the way it is. Or they'll say, I know, it's a ridiculous process and it's going to stink. You're not going to like it. You're going to hate me for this, but I'm still going to ask for it. Or I've heard, I am going to need from you. The agent saying, I am going to need from you X, Y, and Z. As though somehow them giving you paperwork is serving your interests, not theirs. And I've got news for you. We all operate out of the self-interest principle. This is one of our main persuasion principles. People do what is in their own self-interest. It's how we operate as human beings. So don't hate someone if they come to you and they're acting in their own self-interest, right? You have your own self-interest. You want to vet the client, so you're going to ask them for paperwork. You want to see what they've got going on. You want to make sure they're organized so that you can be efficient and get the job done. But if you convey that in a way that is serving your interest, you're going to lose 99 out of 100 times. The client does not want to serve your interest. They want you to help serve their interests. So that's how you should present it, as their interest. Here is why you benefit, client, from this paperwork conversation, right? Just the conversation alone is going to provide a huge amount of value, because I'm going to share within that value of why it's in their benefit. I'm going to share with them what the expectations are of the landlord and why it's important to be prepared and how they win more quickly and get the apartment that they want if we are prepared. So I'll start with the end in mind and go back. Here's the situation. The more prepared we are with paperwork, the more organized I have your paperwork and ready to go in clean, pristine manner in one PDF, ready to go for how that landlord or that agent wants to receive the paperwork, the better prepared I am to deliver that, the more likely it is that our application is going to rise to the top of the pile and that we will get approved quickly and not allow for any competition to come in. Something comes on the market today. Look, I am a listing agent. I do about 60 to 80 rental deals a year at my buildings on 19th Street. So I come from this on the agent side, not only from my management side, but on it as an agent right now. I have a portfolio of 300 units. I do about 60 to 80 deals in those two buildings every year. So I see all of the paperwork that comes in. I see how it's prepared. I see the difference between one prepared client, one who's not. I know from experience that if I have a listing and it's been on the market for a day and I get a qualified applicant with clean paperwork, it's ready to go, I have very little to do to mess around with it before I send it to the landlord, I am going to receive it, look it over, send it to the landlord, and that could be done in a matter of minutes. My landlord happens to be a landlord who approves deals quickly. So within an hour of that person sending me their paperwork, it could go to the landlord and it could get approval. It could happen that quickly. And when it happens that quickly, that means that anybody else who's seeing it is likely not even going to get their application in front of the landlord. If I have multiple applications, I'll send them multiple applications. But if I have one, send to the landlord, they approve it. Now we're off to off to the races on the lease document. We're off to leases at that point. So I'm going to start and tell them this is what happens if we're prepared or if we're not prepared. And this is why it's in your benefit to have this conversation about paperwork and ultimately for us to gather all of the paperwork prior to going out to search and for you to send me that paperwork so that I can arrange it and make sure that it's nice and clean and in the organizational way that I like to provide paperwork. I'll redact social security numbers. I will redact account numbers. All of the things that you would love me to do with your paperwork, I'm prepared to do those things because I'm set up to do it. I do it every day, right? I don't have to go back and forth with a Sharpie marker and redact documents. I don't have to take screenshots and turn them into PDFs, right? Or if you do have screenshots, I can turn them into PDFs. I have all of the tools at my disposal to take your paperwork and make it clean and nice now. Because if we do that when we first see the apartment you love, that's a process that could take hours on your part to get it to me, and then hours on my part to get it organized. And those are hours we just do not have. So that's self-interest. All right, so let's talk about another reason that I use, another way to handle that objection. What I tell my clients, and this is whether I'm meeting with a buyer or a renter, I will have them come, if they're a buyer, I'll have them come with their pre-approval or pre-qualification if they have one. And I will have them come with the revenue financial statement filled out completely. And a lot of people will say, well, that seems intrusive. Well, it's intrusive if it's not in their interest. If it's intrusive if I'm the one asking them for it and they think it's for my benefit and not their benefit. But the minute that I explain to them that their financial statement, or in the case of a rental, their paperwork, is the roadmap, the game plan that we are going to use to make sure that they get what they want as quickly as we can get it for them. Once they understand that that's it, and that not having paperwork or not having a financial statement is basically like running onto the field without a playbook, running onto the field without ever having practiced any plays, right? That's the analogy. If you want to use one with a client, if you are unprepared to play the game, you are far more likely to lose. So as I explained to my clients, one very important part of my job, and this is one of the education parts of the, build rapport, educate, qualify, and close. One of the important parts of my job is to make sure that I help you establish the best possible game plan to win. And the only way that I can look at our game plan is to see what we've got, right? And this is actually a great one to start that guarantor conversation. So I might not say to someone, you have to have a guarantor, right? They may say to me, do you think I need a guarantor? And a lot of agents' response to that is, well, do you make 45 times a month the rent and income? Well, we're close. Well, if you're close, you need a guarantor. Right? It's serving me. It sounds like in that moment I'm serving me. Even if I am trying to serve the client, it comes off as I'm serving my own interest. Yeah, get me more. Get me more paperwork. Make my job easier by making you more qualified, as opposed to this is why you might consider a guarantor. So I'll start with the soft. All right, let's talk about you. Maybe you don't need one, right? So let's talk. So this is my opportunity to get a tremendous amount of information about their qualifications, because what's at stake here is whether they can do this on their own or whether they need a guarantor. So as you imagine, if I just go straight to yeah, you need a guarantor. So you're going to need guarantor paperwork and it's going to be the same as your paperwork. I now have moved on to the guarantor. I may have turned off the client. Client may feel frustrated, may feel like, well, I don't think I need a guarantor. And they may feel like I'm serving my interest rather than theirs. Whereas if I take the opportunity to say to them, all right, great, let's talk about your paperwork first. I would love it if you can get this done without a guarantor. That would probably be easier for you, and that makes a lot of sense. And, I get it. You're 28 years old, 29 years old, 40 years old, 50 years old. You don't want to use a guarantor. I get it. I understand that, right? Acknowledgement. But let's talk about your paperwork so that we can see if we can process our game plan and come up with a strong game plan where we feel like we can win with the plays that we already have. Your paperwork, your roommate's paperwork, your paperwork, your partner's paperwork. All right. Then once I have that detailed conversation with them about their paperwork, and I walk through with them all of the steps of what the landlord might ask for, what kind of paperwork, why do they care about 2022 tax returns? If we're in 2024 and they started their job in 2023, or they started their job late in 2022, their concern, legitimate as you can imagine, is that, oh, the landlord's going to ask me for 2022 tax returns. My 2022 tax returns are going to show little or no income. I didn't work that long in 2022, or I didn't work at all in 2022. So is that really going to play against me that I didn't make any money in 2022? They all of a sudden start to get this anxiety of like, if I show that paperwork, it makes me look weaker. This is where you have the ability to have a conversation around context with that client, where you can say to them, well, look, here's the deal. For some landlords, it won't matter. Some landlords do go back a couple of years and they want to see longevity of income. But this is the entire reason we come up with a game plan, right? Because if we know that you and your roommate, you and your partner are showing little or no income in year 2022, but you're showing adequate income in 2023 and year-to-date income that is commensurate with your income from last year, and year-to-date income and last year's income on your tax returns make you look qualified, but 2022 drags you down. Well, that's something we need to be aware of. And when I have conversations with the landlord, mind you, this is where I start to make the subtle connection that they need me, right? This is where I'm starting to make the connection to that client that this is a dysfunctional process. Every landlord works differently, and I know what questions to ask and what rocks to turn over. So when we start with our game plan, then I can look and talk to the listing agent, talk to the management company, talk to the on-site agent, and I can get a sense of whether that's going to be an issue for us. And if it is going to be an issue, is it one that we can overcome? In many, many cases, your 2023 income is going to be what they base your income off of, or your multiplier off of. And especially now that we're halfway through 2024, and your year-to-date income, if it looks like it's half or more of 2023, they can make that connection and say, okay, we've got a year and a half of data. By the end of this year, they'll have 2 years of this income. And they don't have to worry about 2022, but there are going to be landlords that do. So that may change our game plan. Maybe there are some properties that become not right for us based on that vetting, but wouldn't we want to know that in advance? Rather than putting our eggs in that basket, waiting 48 hours only for the landlord to come back and say, I'm sorry, we're not comfortable with your application, and now we're back on the street, right? We're back out there trying to find your apartment. My job for you is to make this process as efficient as possible, as fun as possible, and as successful as possible. That's my job. That's why you hire me. And by the end of this call, I'm hoping that you will say, yes, Eric, I know you're the person I want to hire, right? So the game plan allows you to have a deeper conversation about paperwork on the phone right then and there. Then once you had the conversation about paperwork, once you know all the details, then the next question is, great, I would love to organize this. I'm gonna go back one slide. Um, I would like to organize this paperwork so that, as I mentioned before, once we are in the middle of our process and we are in front of the landlord and we are asked to deliver paperwork, that we're ready to go. You've already taken the step to talk about their paperwork. They've already told you what's in it. Now the question is, are they willing to share it with you? And in a best case scenario for them and for you, but in all of our context with this kind of a conversation, we're focusing on the client's interest, not ours. But it is in their best interest. Best case scenario is that you receive their paperwork, and that you're able to then shuffle it around, take a look through it, look to see if there are any discrepancies between what they said and what is actually true, because we all know that that happens, right? They will tell you, I have $57,000 in the bank, and then they send you a bank statement and they are the secondary name on that bank statement, or it's a corporate account that is their corporate bank account, not their personal bank account. Does it matter? I don't know. If they're the sole proprietor, if it's their company, it may not matter. But these are the things that we want to know, right? We don't want surprises. So when you get the paperwork, you're then able to look through it and go, hey, I noticed that you have a bank account where your mother and father are the main account holders and you're listed as a secondary account holder. Can you tell me more about that? Oh yeah, all of that, that's my money. It's just my parents set it up when I was, 18, and they have been on the account ever since, but that's my account. All right. What do we need to do to establish that fact with the landlord? Is it just okay the way it is? Do they need to make sure that they change that account so it's just in their name? And then we can take a screenshot with the new account information where it's just them. Those are the things that you're going to want to do to vet and qualify and prepare and educate that client with paperwork. So the organizational piece is huge. And again, if you look back at the things we just talked about, acting in their self-interest, but then looking at that game plan and the organizational piece, all of that is serving their interests. They win if you're involved and if they allow you to do what you need to do to get them prepared. All right. And then last but not least, compromise. And this is important. And this is why I started the conversation with that idea of explaining what a co-op or a condo paperwork package might look like. Because ultimately, you're negotiating with your client on this conversation. Oh, you know what? I didn't talk about guarantors. I'm going to come back to that in a second. Let me go to guarantors because compromise becomes big with guarantors, and that's really what kind of triggered my remembering that I didn't talk about guarantors, because compromise is something that you should be prepared for with a guarantor, or prepared to not compromise. But realizing that you're in a negotiation is important. All right, so let's take a moment with guarantors. The easier part is going to get the client and their roommate or their partner to say, okay, great, we're going to give you the paperwork, right? Where it becomes a problem is with a guarantor sometimes. If they've done it in the past and they have a certain experience, good or bad, they may want to repeat that experience. They may not ever want to speak about that experience again, or this may be their first time and they are completely appalled by the paperwork that a landlord in New York City would want to see from them. They feel violated. They feel like they're exposed. They feel that, they're put in a position where it's make it or break it for their son, daughter, niece, nephew, family friend, right? They feel as though they're being scrutinized and all they're trying to do is help. Now imagine that. If you put yourself in their shoes, think about their interests. How does it feel to be a guarantor and to be told after you said, yes, I'm happy to help you with this, John. I love you. You're my nephew, and I want to make sure that you get the apartment you need. Oh, they want what? They want to see my full 2023 tax returns. Are you kidding me? They want unredacted so they can see my social security. Oh, and they want my brokerage account, and they want to see significant funds. Oh, this sounds real shady, right? That's what's in their brain. That's what's in their mind. That's why it's really important that you extend that hand to your client, to the tenants, and say, if your guarantor wants to reach out and speak to me, I would love to speak with them. If you hide behind the veil, even if you're a newer agent and you're uncomfortable, it's worse to hide behind the veil than it is to have a frank conversation with a guarantor. You want to prepare yourself for these conversations. So role play them as best you can with other people in your office. Make sure that you're gaining the experience and remembering the conversations that you're having with clients. Because the more you have this conversation, the more free, the less apprehensive you're going to have, or the less anxiety there is going to be around the conversation. So let's say that the client does have a guarantor. I'll tell you one of the tricks that I use to expose the paperwork conversation with a client, right? So we all know that there are additional requirements for a guarantor. Essentially, good credit is a given, right? But when it comes to the income multiple, a landlord typically wants to see twice as much from a guarantor as they want to see from an underlying tenant or a tenant, right? 40 to 45 times, maybe 50 times the monthly rent for an underlying tenant, 80 to 100 times for a guarantor. So if you're looking for a $4,000 a month apartment, they're looking for somewhere in the neighborhood of $320,000 to $400,000 in income from the guarantor. Consistent income that can be very easily tracked, right? Not where they're showing us, paid receipts and 20 different documents. The landlord is going to want to see that this person is stable and consistent for reasonable reasons, right? For obvious reasons. The guarantor, if they're going to bring on the landlord, if they're going to bring on a guarantor to approve a deal to get the tenant over the finish line, they're going to want to know that guarantor is going to be there, is going to be ready to contribute to handle this situation if the underlying tenant stops paying rent or defaults on their rent. No landlord is interested in going to court and suing a guarantor. Okay, so we need to understand that no landlord is getting a guarantor involved so that they can go sue happy and sue everybody. They're getting a guarantor involved because it's necessary, and their hope is that guarantor, by signing on and obligating them to that lease document, is going to understand that they are in legal jeopardy, or that they too are legally responsible for payment of that rent if there is a problem. That's why they want to see stability from a guarantor. Okay, so first and foremost, we talked about rent, talked about income, we talked about credit. But that's not where it ends. And a lot of agents will say to their client, if you're going to have a guarantor, they want to see 80 to 100 times the monthly rent in annual income, and they'd like to see that person has good credit. You may even add in, they want to see that they have some liquidity, right? If you really supersize, or if you're really robust in your intro rental conversation, or in that first consultation, you might say that as well. They want to see that they have some liquidity, right? And you're indicating that they're going to want to see some bank account information, right? This is how I do it. I say to the client, contrary to popular belief, a lot of agents will tell their clients that there are two things that make a great guarantor. They meet the income requirement, and they have good credit. The reality is there's a third piece that the landlord that is required in order for a guarantor to be a viable, good guarantor. Oh, what is that? The third piece is that they have to be willing to supply the necessary paperwork to get the job done. So, unfortunately, even if your guarantor makes $1 billion a year, has $15 billion in the bank, and has an 850 credit score, even if that's the case, if they are unwilling to provide paperwork to the landlord to demonstrate that wealth and demonstrate that income, they're not a qualified guarantor. What do you mean, Eric? They are qualified. They make $1 billion a year. One of the qualifications of a guarantor is their willingness to provide paperwork. And this is where I say to my client, if your guarantor wants to have a conversation with me about the process, I am happy to have that conversation. But what is critical when you're conveying this information, and I'll follow up with an email and put all this in an email so you just cut and paste it to your guarantor, or you can share their email with me. I'll put them on the email thread. But what's important that is conveyed to the guarantor is that their willingness to provide paperwork is a key component to their qualifications. Well, what paperwork are they going to need, Eric? They're going to need the same paperwork that is required from you. Now, I understand that with a guarantor, there are some pieces of that paperwork that may not be germane or may not be relevant, right? They may not have a landlord reference letter. Probably do not, because they probably own a home. Okay, if they don't own a home, we're not going to provide a landlord reference letter. And in most cases, landlords don't ask for a mortgage statement or some sort of value of their home. It's possible in a co-op or a condo, they may want to see that. They may want to see, if they have $150,000 left on that mortgage, but the house is worth $1 million, they may want to see some comps to show that the house is worth $1 million, right? It gets complicated with co-ops and condos sometimes. But in a normal rental transaction, that's not likely. So, all right, they don't need a landlord reference letter. They are the CEO of their company. So they get paid a draw, or they get paid not like a normal W-2 employee where you get a weekly paycheck or a bi-weekly paycheck, right? So a pay stub may not be something that they have. If they're the CEO of their company, it's likely that they can't get a letter of employment letter, a typical employment letter from HR, right? That might be a little foolish. However, the landlord might require a CPA letter, which if they're dealing with that kind of wealth, I'm sure they are likely to have a CPA. But a CPA letter, a certified public accountant letter that stipulates this, X person, I've been doing their taxes for the last 25 years. Last year, they earned X amount of dollars in income. They are projected to make the same. They have over $15 billion in net worth. That's about it. On company letterhead signed by the CPA. That might be their version of employment letter. But we might have to shift the paperwork a little bit. But the bottom line is the basics of the paperwork, the landlord vetting income, assets, and credit, those things remain the same. So so then your tenant may say, well, last time my dad didn't have to provide any paperwork. Okay, and that may be the case. I have no idea what your process was last time. Was that in New York City? Yeah, it was in New York City. It was in Brooklyn. Okay, there may be a one-off scenario where you found a situation where they were willing to take your dad at his word, or maybe they did a letter of credit where they did some of their upfront rent and you just weren't aware of it. It's something you can't do anymore, right? So laws have changed. And here's the thing. We may be able to find one landlord that will take your dad's word about what he earns. But are you willing to relegate your choices or limit your choices to only those landlords or apartments for which they will take your dad on his word? Because if we're going to search, if that's the search we're going to do, then wow, you need me more than ever, because there's no way on earth that you alone are going to be able to vet landlords to that degree to determine who will or who will not take your father as a guarantor before you see the apartment. You're going to waste your time going to left, right, and center, seeing 100 apartments where maybe one of them will allow that deal to happen. So if you want to limit your choices significantly, then we can search for only those apartments that will take your dad at his word. If you want choice, if you want to open the search and get the apartment you want, The better suggestion is that let's have a conversation with your dad so that he understands that I will do everything in my power to protect his information. He can trust me, and I want to have a conversation so that he feels that he can trust me, or she feels she can trust me. I want to have that conversation with them so that I can build that trust and rapport, and they can overcome the objection of I won't give paperwork. I will promise your mom, your dad, your uncle, your aunt, I will promise them that I will only ever give the paperwork that is required by the landlord. I will redact every ounce of private information that is allowed for me to redact. And I will promise them that the paperwork that I review will be, in my firm, will be seen by my eyes only. And I will directly convey that paperwork to either the listing agent or the landlord. That I can promise you. So that is the compromise. Let's go back to the compromise. We got our compromise. So that's the compromise. The compromise may be not that you're not going to receive the paperwork, not that you can't get the paperwork, or that you're going to tell the guarantor or the client that, oh yeah, we'll probably be okay with one tax return. Oh, we'll probably be fine with just your checking account. Because that's just not helping them. That's not true, and that's not serving their interests. But if you have certain elements to negotiate with them, which is, I will always tell you what the landlord wants. I will redact anything that I can. I will promise you that that the paperwork will only be seen by me. These are all value elements. These all have a value to that guarantor or to that client. Your benefits that you offer your client fall into two categories: protection and results. This is protection. You are offering them something that helps protect them, and that's beneficial to them and has value for them. So exchanging that benefit of protection for them complying with you and giving you paperwork, you've just made an exchange of value. That's negotiation. So instead of setting yourself up where your back is against the wall and you have nothing to negotiate with your client when they say they're not going to give you paperwork, give yourself some room to exchange. I'm willing to do this, but I need this in exchange. If another compromise you can make with a guarantor is you can say, look, Mr. Guarantor, typically I receive all of the paperwork in advance, and I'll tell you why. The benefit to you for me receiving paperwork in advance is I can look through it. I can I can take out things that we don't need, like page 3 through 175 of your tax return. Frankly, in most cases, we'll only need the first 2 pages of Federal 1040. Page 2 through 13 of your Merrill Lynch statement. Likely, I will only need the summary page with your ending balance, so that they don't get to see all of your trades, all of your positions, all of that stuff, right? I may need to show that to the landlord, but typically I will be able to get away with the first 2 pages of the tax return. We will be able to get away with the first 2 pages of the tax return and the summary page of the bank statement. So I will, if you'd like, you can send me just that information, just the first 2 pages, just the summary page, with the caveat that if the landlord requires the full bank statement, that you're ready to supply that to me when we need it. What's the benefit? What's the exchange there? The reason I want the paperwork is to verify. I want to see that he has $15 billion in the bank if he's going to show me that much money. I want to see that he earns $1 billion, right? I have had guarantors that said that they earn $500,000 a year or $1 million a year, and they own a business, and their after tax income or income after deductions is zero. They have written off every bit of profit that they have on their business to save themselves the tax burden, and they have essentially zeroed out their returns, so they've made nothing in the eyes of the government. That's different than saying I earn $500,000 a year. I literally spoke to a guarantor when I was a manager who told me on the phone, Eric, I am standing on the porch of my backyard in Italy overlooking my vineyard. And you want to see more income? That's what he told me. And I had to say to him, and very calmly, I understand, sir. I hear where you're coming from. However, in the eyes of the landlord, we don't have income. So unless we're able to satisfy them in some other way, or to show them that there is income that we're not showing them right now, the landlord is not seeing $500,000 of income. They're seeing zero. And I know that's frustrating. And I know that you have all of the wealth in the world to be your son's guarantor. But in this case, they're going to require a certain level of income for you to be the guarantor. He ended up stepping aside and someone else stepped in to be the guarantor because we just couldn't do it, right? So you want to vet the paperwork, and the way that you get around getting nothing is getting something. The first 2 pages of the tax return, the first page of the bank statement, that's what you get, right? Another compromise that you can make with a guarantor is you can say, if you're striking out on all of these, right? These are different stages, different levels of where I would like to be. But notice I start with what I more than what I need. I start with the co-op and condo conversation so that I can negotiate to what I actually want, which is all of the paperwork. If I can't get what I want, now my position, I'm making compromises. I'm negotiating off of a big position of strength rather than just taking the scraps my client is willing to give me. And that's where you get into trouble, is when you get off that call and they're telling you how it is. Eric, you don't need anything from me right now. And you don't need anything from my daughter right now, right? So, and that signifies a trust issue, right? They're willing to give you their paperwork. You have shown that you've established trust. That helps you in the close portion of this, build rapport, educate, qualify, close. The close portion of those 4 steps becomes a lot easier when the client, or it becomes a lot more apparent when the client is saying, absolutely, after this call, we'll send it to you. Can we send it secure server? Can we send it password protected? Can we send it to a Dropbox? They're asking you how to send it to you rather than whether they're going to send it to you. And that's how you know you've closed with that client, or at least closed with the relationship. Now you've got to close on the deal, right? Closing on the relationship is part of that intro rental consultation. So the last backup kind of compromise that I will make with that guarantor, and typically I'll only do this with a guarantor. I need the tenant's paperwork, because that I really need to see as part of our game plan. Do we even need the guarantor? We really need to understand what we're looking at from the underlying tenant, because it may not matter what the guarantor is making if the paperwork, or if the credit scores, or if the documentation from the underlying tenants or from the tenants is bad, right? So the last ditch compromise I'll make with a guarantor is I will say, look, if you're uncomfortable sending me paperwork right now, I hope that I can establish trust over the next day or 2 with your daughter, with your son, with your nephew, niece. I'm hoping I can establish a level of trust with them when they meet me over the next day or 2, where you change your mind and you are willing to share your paperwork with me, because it really does benefit you. We may lose out on an apartment because we're not prepared. We'll have all of the paperwork from the tenants, but we may not have your paperwork. And if we don't have your paperwork, we got nothing. And so I don't want us to be held up or lose out on an apartment because I'm waiting for you to get out of a meeting or for your assistant to send me paperwork. It could be the matter of minutes. And see what I'm doing subtly here with that guarantor is I'm putting a little outside pressure on them. Do you, the person who stepped in to say yes to your special person in your life, that you will help them and by being a guarantor, do you really want to put yourself in a position where you are the reason they don't get the apartment? That's how I want them subtly to feel without making them feel that way. I want them internally to internalize that pain point. I don't want to be the one who holds this up. And maybe over a course, if they're not willing to do it that day, over the course of the next day or two, they finally say, okay, you know what? John has said that you're awesome. John has said that you're trustworthy. John is feeling really good about this. I now feel good about giving you my paperwork. Or they give it to you the minute that they find the apartment that they want. But at least they're on notice that may jeopardize their ability to get the apartment. So those are the compromises that you'll make. And this is how you deal with that paperwork objection. Remember these key things. Always serve the client's self-interest. Well, start with trust. First, build trust. If in order to have this conversation, there has to be, or there should be, a certain level of trust. It makes this conversation a lot easier. It makes you able to say to the client, we're going to have a conversation about paperwork, and I'm having this conversation for you to serve your interests, not mine, yours. So build that trust. Second, put yourself in their shoes. Understand their interests. What objections might they have, and why are they reasonable? Why is a client afraid to hand over all of their paperwork unredacted, including account numbers and social security numbers? Newsflash, everybody, we have a terrible reputation. In our industry has a terrible reputation. We're lodged in between politicians and used car salesmen. That's the reality. You can buck that notion, and you can blow your clients' minds by being everything that is not what represents our industry, or showing them that you are exactly opposite to the typical broker. You have that opportunity. There is a huge opportunity to differentiate yourself in that way. But understand when the client comes to you that they've got walls built up. They've got issues that have developed either on that search or searches prior in the past. You are not the first agent that they've called or contacted. You are likely not the first person they've talked to, and those conversations may have been horrific, and likely were. We all know it because we talk to co-brokers all the time. And we know how those conversations can go, and we're in the industry, let alone a client, right? So understand that these objections and that their unwillingness to just fork over paperwork to you is logical and reasonable. So put yourself in their shoes, understand what their self-interests are, and appeal to their self-interests. How does that go? Once again, Mr. or Mrs. Client, if you do X, you will benefit by Y, Z, A, B, and C. It is in your interest to do D because of E, F, and G. Why? Because I am satisfying their self-interest by inserting sound logic. That's how it goes. All right. And then make sure that you are focusing on a game plan. Remember, you're drawing up the plays, right? In the dirt, in the sand, you're drawing a playbook, whatever it is, you need to know who's on the field and what their skills are and what they're willing to do, what they're able to do in order to draw up the best play possible to score. That's the analogy. And if you don't like sports, then use cooking, right? We can't cook a proper dish without knowing what ingredients we have and what tools we have, right? If a master chef walks into a kitchen and you tell them that you want them to make, I don't know, coq au vin, and then they say, oh, great. Okay, so what do we have for ingredients? I don't know. Do you have any kitchen supplies, any tools, any appliances that are going to be available to me? I don't know. Figure it out, right? So it helps that chef, and it helps the people who are going to eat the food. Everybody everybody benefits if you know what you've got to work with. And so that's the game plan piece. Organizational piece, I can't stress this enough, especially right now in the hot rental market. There are 5 tenants for every apartment. I told you I have 2 buildings on 19th Street, 201 and 222 East 19th Street. The amount of applications and interest I get with each and every listing that I have, and many of my listings never even go to the market because I have several applications already on existing from the apartment that person lost out on because they didn't get the last apartment. So there are so many applicants, and I can tell you from the person who vets each and every one of these applications, whose job it is to organize the paperwork and send it to the landlord, that if paperwork is organized, it's clear, it's concise, and I've got a qualified tenant in front of me who's willing to pay the asking rent, I will send that application up in a heartbeat. And my landlord, if it's that clear and concise, because I put everything into the cover letter, it's very easy to review. They can approve a tenant in 5 minutes based on the way that I organize the paperwork. If you can help the listing agent or the management company through that process more quickly, you will eliminate the competition before the game even starts. And if a client understands that, if they understand the difference between losing an apartment and getting an apartment has everything to do with preparedness and organization, how could they not give you their paperwork? What would stand in their way other than trust? And if that's the case, you got to go back to the trust piece. Find out how it is that you can build that trust with them. Ask them what they would need from you in order to gain that trust. All right? And then be willing to compromise if necessary. Remember, you're in a negotiation. Just saying to the client, nope, 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 this is the way it is. Nope, nope, sorry, there's no wiggle room here. Nobody likes to be backed into a corner. Nobody. And what do we do when we're backed into a corner? We punch our way out. We don't sit in the corner and just calmly take it while someone's punching us in the face. We punch our way out. Equal and opposite reaction. So the more forceful you are with the client and the guarantor, the more forceful they're going to be with their reply, with their retort, with their punch back. You're inviting them to say no louder and louder and clearer until they just don't want to work with you anymore. That's entrenchment and retreat. And that's what happens when we're unwilling to compromise or make any sort of compromise. You just got to be strategic about what compromises you're willing to make. It doesn't take bending to their will. It doesn't take that to compromise. It takes a small gesture to help them feel that they've won, and a sense of urgency, a sense of reduced risk, a sense of obligation. Those are things that are going to help that person come to the terms with the fact that this is going to happen. All right. So we're coming up on our hour. I want to remind you, if you haven't been to my website yet, again, our website, Archway Partners website. Again, our company is archwaypartners.com. We are a real estate coaching company. And our website is archwaypartnersinc.com. archwaypartnersinc.com. If you go to our website, you will find that we have, if you just give us your name and your email address so that we can stay in contact you with all of the classes that we offer, with the YouTube live series that I do. If you want to just stay in touch, I try to offer as much value as I possibly can as often as I can. But if you want to stay in touch, you can just leave your email and your name, and from there you will receive a free download of a document that we've written about value proposition, about understanding the difference between a value proposition and an elevator pitch, and understanding that knowing the decision maker, tailoring that value proposition as closely as you can to the pain points, the wants, the needs, and the communication style, the behaviors of that decision maker is going to make you more successful. Knowing the difference between a feature and a benefit is going to make you more successful. Coming up with a list of benefits that you can choose from to convey to a specific client to tailor your value proposition will make you better, will make you more successful, will help you achieve more. So go ahead and get that free download on our website. And then last but not least, I'll leave my contact information. If you didn't get it before, you could see the web address, archwaypartnersinc.com. You can find me on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram at Eric the Expert. Most of the reels I do are around, some of them are fun real estate reels that I do for my own listings, but a lot of the content that I also do is about negotiation, buyer psychology, conflict resolution. So take a look at Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok, and then come back for more on YouTube for these live sessions. Subscribe, subscribe to my YouTube channel so that you can get notified the next time I'm doing one of these. And we'll continue on with this series so that I can educate you through the process during this rental season. And if you're not an agent, if you're a renter out there, who happens to be watching us live or who finds this after the live session, there is so much value here for you as a renter. I will say first and foremost, my first piece of advice to you is to hire a competent real estate agent. I mean that from the bottom of my heart. I'm on the listing side of the transaction most of the time, and my landlord pays my commission. So frankly, I don't financially benefit one way or another if a client comes in directly or if they come in with an agent. But I can tell you, the ones that come to me with agents are far more prepared, if the agent is good, are far more prepared, they're willing to show or able to show their qualifications far more clearly, and they rise to the top of the pile. I love working with other agents. I love making appointments with other agents, doing special things for other agents who consistently show my properties. So if you are out there doing this on your own and you've picked up on this YouTube live or a rebroadcast of this to try to get information about the rental market, good for you. Do all of the research you can. Hopefully you'll understand that this organizational piece, the preparedness piece, is something that you can do on your own if you're skilled. You're not going to know how each landlord wants it. So frankly, it's another reason you need an agent. But at the very least, if you're committed to doing this on your own and you are refusing to ask for help from an agent because you don't want to come out of pocket or you can't come out of pocket, I get it. I understand it. So take these tools and try to use them if you need help, if you need guidance, if you just need a little bit of advice. Look, contrary to popular belief, we as real estate agents offer so much free advice and value every day. I am here to offer you advice if you want some. So if you're a renter out there and you just want a little bit of advice, I am happy to provide it to you. I don't get paid from any transaction unless I represent a tenant and a deal gets done. So by asking my advice, you're not obligating yourself to any financial obligation whatsoever. I like helping people. So feel free to reach out to me. If you do end up wanting help, someone on my team will be happy to help you as well. So thank you very much. I'll see you next time. And until then, it's Eric the Expert signing off from Archway Partners.